This podcast contains explicit language.
Bafangu! This episode of the Dorking Out Show podcast is brought to you by
The letter Y. Because you can't spell yes without Y. Yes, I did receive your text. And no, I'm not going to answer you.
Houston, flight is go.
Myla, let's go. SPM, safety contact.
From Assignment X, thesoniashow.com, and Amalgamated Storytelling. This is the Dorking Out Show, the podcast for people who love stories from movies, TV, books, podcasts, and everywhere else.
Welcome to episode 102 of Dorking Out. This is the Dorks Fix the Oscars edition. With me today is my co-host, Emmy Award-winning filmmaker and nerd author, Christopher Allen Smith.
Hey, Sonia, how are you doing?
Pretty good. How are you?
I'm pretty excited. I am very excited about this episode. We have been talking and shit-talking all over the place for years about the Oscars, and I feel like we cracked it. I feel like we got this fixed. I'm very excited, but how are you doing?
Good. Are you going to introduce me? Introduce me.
Oh, sorry. Yes. With me today is my co-host, professional writer and author of The Sonia Show, and great reminder for people who wander off on tangents. That's right. You know what? I'm wondering. I've done that so many times. I'm wondering if we can unfortunately develop a drinking game for me not paying attention and not introducing you, or
I'm already playing that game. And I'm playing that game every time we record.
You know what? I gotta tell you, I'm a little mortified that like some doctor somewhere is gonna listen to like past episodes and listen to this and then feel like, oh wow, he's really exhibiting the symptoms of Alzheimer's. He's really getting hit. So yeah. Anyway, that's my fear. How many times do I have to talk about Alzheimer's on the show? Jesus.
You do it every week.
I know.
But the thing is, you don't remember that you did it
I
the
was
week
just
before.
gonna say, do I do it every week? Oh, God. Oh, God. All right. Whew. Well, you know what?
What are we talking about this week?
We're talking about we did it.
For Alzheimer's.
We did it. Sonia, we finally did it. For almost 2 years, we have hemmed and hawed on this podcast about how we love movies, but the Oscars suck. For almost 90 years, the Oscars have been Hollywood's lavish self-congratulations that in some way or the other always manages to embarrass true movie lovers the world over. In 1957, it was Around the World in 80 Days, never heard of it, you say, that beat classics like The Ten Commandments and Giant for Best Picture. In 1969, it was 2001: A Space Odyssey that wasn't even nominated for Best Picture. In 1990, Driving Miss Daisy won Best Picture. In 1990, Driving Miss Daisy won Best Picture. This is also the body that snubbed Al Pacino's Godfather performances, but gave him an Oscar for Scent of a Woman. This is the body that never gave Alfred Hitchcock an Oscar for Best Director. This is the body that did not give Humphrey Bogart an Oscar for his performance in Casablanca.
Which I just rewatched on Valentine's Day, and that is some bullshit.
That is spectacular. That a performance like that in a movie like that, he was nominated. These people get nominated, and just the weirdest movies come out of left field to just screw things up.
While you're talking, I'm going to look up who beat him.
Yeah. So The point is, they don't know what they're doing. Luckily, Sonia and I know what we're doing.
Right.
We know how to fix it all. This is definitely a situation where armchair quarterbacks are going to win the Super Bowl. Listen to this episode of Dorking Out, and you're going to hear about how we're going to fix the Oscars. And when we're done, you're going to think, oh my God, that would be great. Why don't they do that? Now that I have walked us very far out on this limb, Sonia Mansfield.
Yeah, I totally have just been sitting here trying to figure out who beat Humphrey Bogart for
that's right.
Best Actor.
So
I'm not listening. Everybody drink.
So Sonia Mansfield.
Yes.
You and I have done 3 blog entries on the Oscars that have come out in the last few days that we're basing this podcast on, where we've put out all our thinking, but we're going to run down the highlights here on the show, and we're pretty excited. Part 1 talks about what's wrong with the Oscars as they're run and as they've have been run.
Which is a conversation you and I have been having for like 30 years.
Exactly. So that's kind of why we're going to skip over that, because we've had that conversation on this show before. Part 2 talks about how the nominating and awards would work if they were done correctly. Hint, comedies and genre movies would stop getting fucked over. Part 3 talks about what the 2018 Oscars would be like in the alternate universe where we ran the awards. So those are the blog entries that we're basing this on. If you'd like to hear more about what we talk about today, that's where you can find it. But Sonia Mansfield.
Yes.
Why do we care so much about the Oscars? Why did we do all this?
I think it's because we just super love movies. And here's the thing, like every year we shit all over the Oscars, but we watch them every year because we love the movies and we don't want to miss out on the one night of the year when they really celebrate supposedly the best movies that came out in a year. So that's why we super care. And that's why I don't know. I feel like you and I and like other people who super love movies, like we care about the Oscars because it's like our Super Bowl, right?
Yeah.
You want the best movie to, I don't know. It's hard to explain, but we're such dorks.
Yeah. Well, we are
about
such
it.
Dorks.
And like we want a representation of the year that's like I'm not saying what I want to say very well.
We want it done right.
I actually haven't been drinking.
Well, you do a great impression. We want this. We want the awards to be done right. We want the movies that do great things to be rewarded. We want it to be, because
then the people who like maybe aren't super into the movies are like the Oscars are bullshit. Because remember when, Scent of a Woman or Driving Miss Daisy or whatever wins, and you just have to shrug your shoulders and be like, yeah, you're right.
Right.
The Oscars are bullshit, but you don't want them to be.
Kind of. But that's the other thing is, I really do like Dances with Wolves, for example. I know that's a kind of it's become a cool movie to kick around or whatever, kind of like Titanic, and that's another thing. Well,
it's Forrest Gump. Forrest Gump is one of those movies that I actually really like, and I totally defend it to people all the time. It's totally one of those movies where like the cool kids are like, fuck Forrest Gump. And I'm like, how dare you? Yeah. You love Forrest Gump. You loved it.
Exactly. And that's kind of where I'm going is, I defend Dances with Wolves, but it seems insane that Goodfellas never won Best Picture. It just seems crazy. So anyway, how do you fix that? How do you fix movies when two good movies come out in a year, or two or three classics, or like 1939 is a classic example. How do you pick between Gone with the Wind, It's a Wonderful, or Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, and The Wizard of Oz? Have fun filling out that ballot.
Right.
So here, let's start with this. How would Oscar season go if Chris and Sonia ran the show? The first thing that happens, it would start out very much like it happens now, which is at the end of January, some nice actor and actress would come up at the crack of dawn, God knows when. I've never watched. I think
to read about how other people are going to get awards.
Right, to read about other people to get awards. And the way it is now is they announce Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actor, Actress, and they go down the whole thing. That would not happen. And then we all have fun speculating, who's going to win this? Who's going to win that? What's going to happen? Blah, 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 blah. None of that would happen in our setup. But they would come out.
Which kind of ruins the fun for us, Smith.
No, it doesn't. It makes it much better, and here's how. They would come out and they would say, because each year, 40, 50, 60 movies, depending on what category, get nominated. They would come out and they would say, these are the movies that are nominated for Academy Awards. And they would just list them in alphabetical order. For example, in 2018, it would be Abacus, Small Enough to Jail, All the Money in the World, Baby Driver, Beauty and the Beast, Blade Runner, Call Me by Your Name, Coco, Darkest Hour, down.
I was like, oh my God, he's really going to read them all.
No, you get it. So it's like some of those are like Abacus, Small Enough to Jail. What the hell's that? Well, that's, it's one of the documentary movies. So that makes sense. All the Money in the World, I recognize that. There was all this chatter about Ridley Scott making this movie, and is this any good? I wonder if it's nominated for Best Picture. I don't know. Michelle Williams gets nominated a lot for Best Actress. Is she nominated? I don't know. She gets
nominated a lot for Best Supporting Actress for playing crying wives.
That's right. That's right. Is she nominated? I don't know. I guess you have to watch the Oscars. Blade Runner 2049. Did that kind of sneak in? Did people finally kind of wise up and see what a great movie that is, and give it some Oscar love? I don't know. You would have to watch. All you would know.
The answer is no.
Yeah, the answer is no. But you'd have to watch the show to find out who won what. But it would kind of be even more extreme now than it is now, because now you have, they give you some rough idea. Here are the 5 actresses. Here are the 5 actors, and here are the 5 directors, blah 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 blah. So a reasonable question becomes, how the hell would that work? Like, how would you? So you answer that. What would it be like?
You're
to watch
ruining
the show?
Office Oscar pools all across the country.
No, but I think it would be so much better, because Sonia, when people tune in to the Oscar telecast in the world where everything is done correctly, what's the first big difference that they would notice as opposed to the way that they're done now?
Right. There really aren't like nominations. If you're nominated, you get an award.
Exactly.
When all these actors and actresses, writers, directors, and they say like it's an honor just to be nominated, it really will be.
Right. Now, this might sound like the worst kind of everybody gets a participation award.
Yay!
Kind of BS, but it's really not, because what happens is, when we were doing the research to this piece, we went to a guy named Stephen Fellow's blog, on kind of a data blog on movies. And in 2016, there were 736 films released in theaters. That's about twice as many as there were in 2000. So if you're one of the top movies in contention in 2016, chances are, if you're the top 3 comedies, or if you're the one comedy nominated for an Oscar, chances are you're the best comedy.
Right.
So you should get recognized for that. Now, the other thing is when we look back at years past, it's like, how the hell do you choose between Pulp Fiction and Forrest Gump, or Hidden Figures and The Arrival, 12 Years a Slave and Gravity? It's insane. You just can't do it.
These movies are nothing alike. That's the thing.
Right.
It's like, it really is when people say like, oh, it's like apples and oranges. It really is.
Well, you know what?
It's like this movie really touched my heart and made me cry, but this one made me laugh so hard I peed my pants. Like,
right.
Those are both really great movies.
Those are both really great human reactions. And, that's the other thing. I would say it's even worse than apples and oranges. It's apples and the crankshaft mounting to a Model T. It's like, these are so fun. I
don't know what any of those words are.
Well, that's what I mean. It's like, this is something that you eat, and this is something that they hadn't been used in 50 years, and it's this small, tiny esoteric park stuck under a car from 100 years ago. It's difficult to even conceive that these two things are on the same planet. So our answer is just stop with that. Just stop, like this year, Get Out and Lady Bird and Shape of Water do things that are radically different. And as we've already said, in 1939, Gone with the Wind, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, and The Wizard of Oz, they do things completely different, completely, They're not trying to achieve the same thing. They're not made for the same audience. They're not examining the same thing, or even they're just, it's impossible. So we're just saying, stop doing it. If you're good enough to get nominated, you're good enough to get something. And that leads us into part 2, which is the main kind of thing. And here we need to credit Tim Dorks at the AMC film site for doing a real smart breakdown and kind of collating what Sonia and I and a lot of people who like to pay attention to the Oscars have talked about for years, but it's kind of like he really did the math and figured out the data, which is, if you're a comedy, don't even bother wanting to get an Oscar. Dramas, mainly historical dramas, a lot of historical dramas with British people, which we've talked about, have a screaming advantage when it comes to what awards get nominated or what movies get nominated. The other thing is, and this shocked me when I've heard it recently, there has never been a science fiction movie that's won Best Picture. Never. Out of 90 years of movies, it hasn't happened once. You know, Day the Earth Stood Still, Star Wars, E.T., The Matrix. You know, some of these are maybe deserving, some of them not. Close Encounters of the Third Kind. 2001, like we said, wasn't even nominated. It's just insane.
Yeah, what was now I'm like, what was nominated that year?
Exactly.
Okay, I'm looking it up.
So what we're thinking is, take what the Golden Globes is already kind of doing, and they used to actually do this with the Oscars. They used to separate out Best Comedy Director and Best Drama Director because their jobs are just so different. So we say, you know what? Here's what you do. You take the best 5 movies or the best 3 movies in each of these categories, and they get recognition. You know,
I don't want to interrupt you, but do you want to hear what was nominated?
You know what? Yeah, I do. Let's.
Okay.
Yeah, what was nominated over 2001?
Oliver.
Exactly. Actually, Oliver won, didn't it?
I'm like, yes.
How have you?
I was like, I don't even need to read the rest of the list, right? But it's like Funny Girl, The Lion in Winter.
What?
Rachel, Romeo and Juliet.
Wait, what is Rachel? I don't. I've loved movies all my life.
Is.
I don't even know what that is. I know what Oliver was because I think my mom and dad had the soundtrack a million, or the Broadway musical record way back when. So, but oh my God, that's insane. I mean, look at those. That kind of crystallizes what we're talking about. Why are those not, those movies that we don't?
Because I think we're all still talking about Oliver.
Or even that, like Rachel. I legitimately have never heard of that movie, and it was nominated over one of the towering achievements in cinema for all time. So that's the thing, is Oscars. And we've talked about this in several instances. This has mainly been my hobby horse, is when Hollywood gets into its self-congratulatory mode, it is just beyond insufferable. So let's just take it out. The top movies in these genres get recognition. Action adventure, children's films, comedies, comic book movies. I know you're not going to like that, but that is a major American cinema genre.
It's just the way it is. Too bad, people.
It's the way it is. It's the way it is. We're
all watching comic book movies now. Right. That's the thing.
Dramas, documentaries, historical films, horror, thriller, suspense movies, musicals, science fiction, fantasy movies, and westerns. Now, you can complain all you want about comic book movies and, they're gonna, they're just a flash in the pan and whatever. And a lot of people said the same thing about, low-rent westerns and westerns back in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. But they were a fad that lasted 60 years. They were a...
But would you even call that a fad at that point?
Well, yeah, exactly. That's the thing, is it's a fad. If you want to go back to, Batman or whatever, or Superman that we just talked about last week with Jeff, yes, the comic book movies are a fad that have lasted 30 years now, and they're only getting bigger, So this is our discussion of you nominate.
Sorry, if you don't want to get on board with comic book movies, then you're the person that was like, doesn't want to deal with rock and roll music.
Right, exactly.
That's what kids are into.
Right.
Kids are into rock music and comic book movies.
So yeah, that's that is a major change. We would kind of in a sense, do away with Best Picture and instead do, the top 3 or the top 5 films in all of these categories. And what that would do is give people great lists, because a lot of people are not like us where they go out every week or every other week and watch movies. It takes them a couple years to see movies that have come out, and the Oscar winners in this instance would produce a list of the best Hollywood has to offer. So go watch them. Sonia.
Yes.
I just mentioned Best Picture. What would this do to the Best Picture category?
My favorite part. So instead of doing like a Best Picture, like it would be Film of the Year. So like all the they're not winners. Do we say winners? Are they nominees?
They are winners. They would actually be winners. We are using the term nominees,
okay.
But they would be winning Oscars.
Winners. So basically all of these winners would be kind of in contention for like what would be the Film of the Year. And the Film of the Year would be like a movie that's really having its moment, that like captures the moment, I guess is the word I'm looking for. Like, and the reason I'm so excited about this one is because this is the one I want every year. Like, I want the Oscars to be like a time capsule of like, what was the movie that was just so fucking awesome that year? I don't want it to be Crash, that sort of thing, where it's like, nobody's going to talk about Crash like 5 years from now, except the fact that it, that it lost or that it won, that it beat Brokeback Mountain. So I like this one because all of these awesome movies from different categories. So the winner of Film of the Year every year isn't going to be like another King's Speech.
Exactly.
Or something. We're going to get some variety. And hopefully it's going to be the kind of movie that, I don't know, people will still be talking about.
Right. Because I think there's a pressure when Oscar voters vote for best film. In I think it was 1964, Stanley Kubrick, who also never won Best Director, Dr. Strangelove was the best movie of that year. I mean, that's a movie that stands up, but it was this weird satirical parody comedy. And when people are feeling self-important and jacked up on their own position and whatever, they don't want to give the best movie of the year to a comedy. They just, that's how you get these weird situations where Oliver or Rachel or My Name is Stanley, which sounds like an Oscar movie, but I just made up right here on the spot. Get an Oscar. Now, the other thing this would do, taking away a little bit of the self-importance would maybe, in 1980, frankly, I can't remember all the Oscar nominees. We might have gotten Airplane, the greatest comedy of all time, might have taken the Oscar for Film of the Year. And it's not so much we're thinking this is the best film, but this is the film that people in this year at this time, it meant the most to us.
Right.
And one of the things that's interesting to think about is Titanic. There's all these, even when Titanic came out, there was all this discussion about, was it really the best and this and that, and wasn't LA Confidential so much better, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, you know what? If you want to look at these two films in a purely cinematic way and talk about them in a purely, critical or snobby or pick your adjective way, LA Confidential's better, probably. But there's no fucking question in the world that Titanic did not roll over the box office and suck up all the oxygen in the film world of 1997. It was a monster like we haven't seen since Titanic.
Right.
Not even Avatar, not even the Avengers. Nothing compares to how crushing the success of Titanic was back then. So to kind of...
People were seeing that movie 5, 6, 7 times. The soundtrack was everywhere. Everyone was talking about Titanic.
Right. That's the other thing, is that's a 3-hour movie.
Yeah.
3 hour and 10 minutes. The other thing is, one of my friends works at the local theater up here, and they have a standing policy of 18 minutes of stuff before a movie. Between
Good
commercials
Lord,
and previews
really?
and whatever. So that's a Cinemark's. That's my understanding is that's the standard Cinemark policy, and I've timed it since he's told me that, and it's on the button almost every
18 minutes of previews?
I think it's...
Is that what you mean?
18 and a half minutes of previews and commercials and, announcements and whatever.
Right.
So you put that on. This is a 3.5 hour undertaking you're
Right.
doing if you're going to Titanic. And Titanic was number one from December, wasn't it, till like March?
Right.
It was number one at the box office for months, not weeks, months and months and
By the way,
months at a time.
movies don't do that now. Now it's like
Right.
you might be number one for like 2 weeks.
Right. Exactly.
Maybe 3 weeks. I think Wonder Woman actually did like a couple of weeks in a row, and everyone was like,
Holy
bananas.
smokes. Yeah.
Like,
exactly.
whoa.
So that's what Film of the Year would do. It would give, by taking out the best film of the, best picture and its Film of the Year, that would give people a little bit more freedom to get off their high horses and recognize things that are not necessarily period British dramas. But Sonia,
Yes.
talk about our next change, because I am very excited about this one. I am supremely excited about this one. I think this might be our coolest change yet.
This is the one where we kind of get to go back in time and make it right. So it's our retro Oscar, where we look at the movies 10 years ago and we make sure we got it right.
Right.
So I think in the blog post, we wrote about the example of like 10 years ago, No Country for Old Men won. Now that one's pretty great. Like, so that one would still be on our list. But then also that came out that year was There Will Be Blood.
Right.
Which didn't win, obviously. Right. And then we had, which is a great movie. So that could still stay. But then after that, it was Atonement, Juno, and Michael Clayton. Do you even remember what Michael Clayton's about?
It's about George Clooney being tense about something.
That's pretty close. My point is, nobody's talking about Michael Clayton.
Right. Exactly.
Or Atonement. I think people still kind of talk about Juno, but
yeah, exactly.
But not nominated that year. Zodiac,
which was on the top of a lot of best movies of the decade in, when 2010 ended. Zodiac was written, didn't even get nominated.
If we gave our retro Oscar, it would be Zodiac.
Right. Which brings, and so, and this is another thing we put in the blog post. So in years past, in 1949, The Wizard of Oz would have gotten its Oscar. In 1952, Citizen Kane would have gotten its Oscar. 67, because Citizen Kane couldn't get an Oscar in 1942.
I would say in 1998, we could have gave an Oscar to Broadcast News.
Oh, snap. We didn't put that one in, but think about this, 2001 obviously would get its Oscar in 1979. Raging Bull, that got shut out in 1980, would have gotten its Oscar. Blade Runner, which was
the one that lost to Ordinary People?
Yes, it is. I'm almost sure that it is.
I have never seen Ordinary People.
You know why? Because
why?
I was just going to make an awful...
Because it's going to make me cry.
It's going to make you cry because it is a supremely depressing movie.
Well, listen to this lineup, though. Ordinary People.
Right.
Coal Miner's Daughter.
Okay.
The Elephant Man.
All right.
Raging Bull.
Uh-huh.
And Tess.
Tess?
Yeah. That's directed by Roman Polanski. So fuck that movie.
So that's aged great. Point is, talk to me about how any of those movies deserve to win over Raging Bull. So yeah, the decade Oscar, because it takes time for movies to find their place in the world. Sometimes people don't notice movies or notice them in a weird way at the very beginning, and they just don't get their footing. Case in point, Blade Runner. Blade Runner was a famous misstep bomb in 1982, but by 1992, people had recognized it for the kind of moody, crazy, interesting, lyrical, futuristic classic that it was. So it would have gotten its Oscar. So,
right.
And then next year, finally, The Dark Knight would get its Oscar because it also was not nominated. Which brings us to the last picture style Oscar that we're doing, and then we get on to the actors. Every movie era has its movie that means something. I would say that probably the movie of the decade for the 90s would be Pulp Fiction. I don't know if you'd agree, but that's that's up there.
Yeah, for sure.
It
spawned a million imitators.
Exactly. So, for the 1930s, definitely Gone with the Wind, as much as that movie might not, be loved now, that movie had a major impact, and it's kind of hard to deny. So what we would do is at the end of every decade, we would wait a year, and then we would give the Deca Oscar, which is every movie that was in contention for that entire decade and had maybe risen to the top of people's consciousness would get to be crowned movie of the decade. So if from 2000 to 2010, everybody's gets their nominations. We take a year off to let things settle out, let people think about it, let a year pass on the last decade, the last year of the last decade. Then in 2011, we would say, all right, this Oscar would only be handed out once a decade. And I think that would be pretty goddamn exciting.
Yeah.
And what that would allow is, this one, when you start thinking and comparing movies, in a way, you could kind of put this back at our feet, is, we are putting different movies against each other in maybe an unfair way, but sometimes movies have their era. So in the 90s, it could be, by the end of the 90s, Pulp Fiction looked pretty good. People were still talking about Goodfellas not being recognized, but then a legit underrated classic like Groundhog's Day could have bubbled up to the top. You know what I mean? Like
now I want to watch Groundhog's Day.
Exactly, that's my thing. So, movie of the decade would be a hell of an interesting thing to think about and thing to go through. But that brings us to actors. Sonia.
Actually, before we move on to actors, can I ask a question that I hadn't really thought of?
Hit me.
Who is deciding this? Is this the Academy?
Yes. That
still the Academy.
I would, that's one thing.
The same membership.
Yeah, well, okay. Ostensibly, because that's the thing is we don't want to just make this everybody who is tangentially involved or interested in movies. This is not like an online internet poll of who gets Oscars. This is people that make this for a living, that know how difficult it is, that know the strifes and struggles and whatever, get to...
So you don't want to turn the Oscars into American Idol.
No. But because we're tuning it in such a way that if you get nominated, right now, what if you get, the people that get nominated now would actually get Oscars in this new scenario, it would spread the wealth around quite a bit, and it would recognize different, comedic performances and dramatic performances and strange performances and all that kind of thing. So, So I think that would be like a nice way to make these awards more recognizable and more reasonable to people who just watch movies because they like movies, and to people who are deeply invested and deeply knowledgeable about movies. This would be kind of I think, kind of solve all the problems at a stroke. So that's kind of what I'm thinking.
Okay. All right, move on to your next one.
All right. Well, I think you're talking about Oscars, performances, if I'm remembering correctly. Talk to us about how the Best Actor and Best Actress categories would be a little different.
So this is a good one too. We're going to break it up because it's just, I don't know. It's just the same every year. So here's what we're going to do. You can be nominated in a different category for playing a historical figure.
Right.
And then you would be at a different category for fictional
characters.
Yes.
Now this one, we have to credit Stephen Thompson of the Pop Culture Happy Hour for this idea. This came out of a February 9th discussion of Gary Oldman in The Darkest Hour, and he laid this idea out. We did not come up with this idea at all, but we were rethinking all the Oscars. He put out this fantastic idea with a fantastic argument for it, so we just took it lock, stock, and barrel.
Because it's just not the same. Like the idea that like Gary Oldman is competing against, my God,
everybody else.
Dominate. Yeah, everybody else. It's like for his impression.
Right.
It's just not the same.
Now he did. I think he did. He did do a good performance. He did a Daniel Day-Lewis style performance where he took a historical character that is kind of chiseled in marble and he made him a real understandable person.
Right.
But what Stephen Thompson said is the Oscars overweigh the art of imitation. When you have an actor come in and do a spot-on and heavily prostheticized perfect imitation of a historical figure, it tends to get treated as more acting instead of what I think it is, which is less acting. It's an impersonation. We just had the Grammys. They don't give a Grammy Award for Best Cover Band, which he's totally right. And which it's kind of...
Which, by the way, they should.
They should.
They should start giving Grammys to cover bands.
Exactly. You know what? I really do think they should. My son Dell is starting a band, and I keep talking to him, and maybe it's just that I love all of Johnny Cash's covers, but it's just like, what you need to do is just do really good versions of covers. There's nothing like a good cover version of a great song. That just makes it so much more interesting.
Yeah.
And
can
that's
I ask a question? Is your son singing?
Yes.
He's singing. Okay.
Yes. Now
then he should do songs that are all by women.
Okay.
Because I think that would be different and people would like it.
You know what? I'm sure you're right. Problem is, he's not a big fan of this whole idea anyway.
Okay.
He's a very, come on, Dad, I got to write my own songs. I'm my own artist. I'm going to do it myself. Which I get it. I understand, but I don't know. And it could be that I am at,
Sorry, I've derailed our conversation now to start talking about your son's band.
That's okay. Yeah, that's right. Brixton Son, they're going to be huge. Anyway, so let's take a look at this and how this has worked in a weird way. In 2012, Meryl Streep won for playing Margaret Thatcher in The Iron Lady. You remember The Iron Lady, right?
I never saw it.
While
I saw the preview for it and I was like, yeah, I get it. I get it.
I saw the preview for it and that's why I didn't see it. No. While Rooney Mara played Elizabeth Salander in The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, and she created a real different, crazy, vibrant, essential performance there. But
right,
who won the Oscar? Hey, Meryl Streep. She's great. Wow, she really sounds like Margaret Thatcher. Have your Oscar. There you go. So we would essentially split out people who are playing regular historical figures and people who are playing fictional figures. Now, we, thankfully, you're probably saying to yourself, are not going to go through every single category from here on out.
Right.
What we're going to say is this idea of giving Oscars to all the people good enough to get nominated, that would filter down to best director, best writer, best music, best sound, best special effects, best. Because, if you're good enough to play at that level, you're good enough to be recognized. This way, Martin Scorsese would have won for Goodfellas, and Kevin Costner would have won for Dances with Wolves. And I will 100% think that's
and then we're all happy.
Actually, we are all happy because, those are two performances that need to get recognized. And Sonia.
Yes.
If this system had been implemented in 1928 when the first Oscars were handed out, can you guess between then and now how many women would have Oscars if every director, all 5 directors from all of those 90 years would have gotten Oscars? How many women do you think would have Oscars right now?
More than one.
Exactly. Because right now, it's only one! Catherine Bigelow for The Hurt Locker in 2010. Right. That's the whole list. That's the beginning of the list. That's the middle of the list. That's the end of the list.
Yeah.
There would be 5 Oscar-winning women. I'm not going to go into them now because 5, how could we go through all of them? But 5.
We don't have that kind of time.
We don't have that kind of time. We have plenty of time to spend 5 minutes talking about Humphrey Bogart's performance.
About your son's cover band.
My son's cover band.
But not...
this. But women, sorry, chicks, don't have time. Oh, my God. Nice. So, Sonia, let's run through what it would be like. What would the 2018 awards look like if they were given out by us? Why don't you list off the Oscars? You know what? Why don't we let's start from the bottom. Let's start with Best Western. And
let's
we will
see here. We're going to go
and best
you said Best Western.
Exactly.
We have one winner. It's Hostels.
Right. No, it's Hostiles.
Hostiles?
This is not the Hostels of Europe.
Oh, see, it's very hard to read.
Did I? Okay, we recently changed up our blog theme, which we will not go into here. But
you know what?
Sorry.
All of our listeners are going to think I've been drinking, and I really haven't.
No, it's really she hasn't been drinking at all. It's the John Belushi quantity of drugs that she's been taking that has led to this performance. I'm sorry. I'm such a jerk.
Anyway.
So, now here's the thing. A reasonable thing could be said is, are there really 5 good Westerns that come out every year that deserve recognition? The answer is no. There are not. Sometimes there are not 5 good musicals. Yeah. So sometimes we would just not give out 5 awards in a category.
Yes.
We'd say
we don't want a Boss Baby, situation here.
Exactly. And this year actually had some really good comic book movies, but there are definitely some years where, you know what, we're not giving this award out this year. There's no one in it. So that brings us to Best Science Fiction Fantasy, Blade Runner, Shape of Water, Star Wars: The Last Jedi, War for the Planet of the Apes. Those are 4 fantastic science fiction fantasy films.
Yep. I would agree with that list.
Next category?
The musical category, The Greatest Showman, and Beauty and the Beast.
Yes, which we would have to have a discussion about. If you're remaking another musical, how does that work?
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So
good question.
Then we have Best Horror, Thriller, Suspense Film, Get Out, It, and The Killing of a Sacred Deer, which I have to admit I have not seen. The Best History Movie, Sonia. What would those winners be?
Battle of the Sexes, The Darkest Hour, The Disaster Artist, Dunkirk, and The Post.
Now, look at that list. Look at that list particularly And you think, all right, yeah, I could see the Post deserves something. Dunkirk definitely deserves something. It's not going to win Best Picture this year, probably. He said famous last words. But, it deserves some recognition. So we're seeing our system kick into place. I'm just going to blast through documentary because, as important as those films are, nobody really cares. Abacus, Small Enough to Jail, Faces, Places, Icarus, The Last Man in Aleppo, and Strong Island. So, Sonia.
Yes.
What would be the drama winners for the 2018 Academy Awards in the Chris and Sonia verse?
Call Me by Your Name, which I also refer to as Call Me Maybe. I call it that name all the time, accidentally. I was like, I still haven't seen Call Me Maybe. I, Tanya, Lady Bird, The Phantom Thread, and 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri.
Now, here's what's crazy. This is more than half of the drama of the Best Picture category as it stands now. That's the fact.
By the way, if I made this list, this movie would not be on this.
No, I understand. Yeah, I understand that. But it's insane, and it shows how crazily overweighted dramas are.
Yeah.
When it comes to it. Then we have comic book movies. Guardians of the Galaxy, Volume 2. A fantastic, fun ride. Logan, a great and very meaningful comic book movie. Spider-Man Homecoming, fun, fantastic movie. Thor Ragnarok. And then Wonder Woman. Now, what's interesting, now that I'm looking at this, we don't have a category for epics. That's one of the things that movies do better than any other category is spectacle. Big, filling a huge screen
what
with
would
crazy
be in there?
Visuals. I don't know. And I don't think we should tax our listeners' time with a long discussion on that right now. But yes. I just realized that is one of the things that I think the comic book category is good for, is highlighting movies that have spectacle, that are meaningful in that way. So then we have children's films.
You didn't do comedy.
Oh, I didn't. You're right. I'm sorry. Sonia.
That's okay.
Can you give us the best comedy Oscars?
The Big Sick, The Disaster Artist, and Logan Lucky, which I guess you think is funny. I haven't seen it.
It's good, and I just realized that we made a mistake here. A Moonlight La La Land style mistake where The Disaster Artist got a recognition in the comedy category and the history category.
Is that not supposed to happen?
Well, I'm thinking they got to pick one, but yeah.
Okay.
Then children's films. This year was not a lot of huge children's films, not a lot of meaningful children's films, but Coco and Paddington 2.
No, Paddington 2 is this year.
I thought it came out at the end of December.
Are you sure?
No. But you know what? These are fake Oscars in the fake universe. So, Sonia.
Yes.
Action and adventure movies. What would be the best action adventure movies?
Oh, you know what? You're right, by the way.
Thank God.
Phew!
It was bound to happen sometime.
Yes. Action adventure. Baby Driver. Dunkirk. See, now Dunkirk's in here twice, too, then. And John Wick 2.
Yeah. You talked...
Which, by the way, Baby Driver, super awesome movie. Right. John Wick 2, people super love it. I still haven't seen it yet. It's on my list.
I could give or take it, but yeah, there it is.
That would be really fun.
Right. Yeah, no, it would be good. And, Baby Driver, that's the thing is, you and I were a little lukewarm on Baby Driver. But
I loved Baby Driver.
Or I was a little lukewarm.
Yeah,
I think that's me projecting my feelings onto you. But,
yes.
I was a little lukewarm on it. But you could tell it was a spectacular ride. So, when we're talking about spectacle, I guess that's what it is. We talk about spectacle between the action-adventure category, the comic book category, and the history category. There's a lot of room for highlighting the best spectacular offerings that film have. The retro Oscar, as we've already discussed, would go to David Fincher's Zodiac. Sonia.
Yes.
What is the film of the year given out at the 2018 Oscars for celebrating the films of 2017?
It is Get Out.
which if you think about it, what movie better encapsulates all that's going on in the world today and all the pleasures of going to a movie today?
Yeah.
You know,
I was just talking about this movie at work the other day about how it was so fun to see in a theater.
Right.
With people. Like, there's just some movies that you need to see it with a crowd, I think. And I mean, I think Get Out is going to be one of those movies that people are just talking about years from now.
Right.
But also, I think just seeing it in a theater and people just freaking out.
Right.
It was so fun.
Exactly. So, you know what? I'm going to make an executive decision, and I need you to second it if we're going to do this.
Okay.
Because this podcast works like a nuclear submarine. It's that important. We both have to turn our keys at the same time to make a decision like this. I'm not sure we need to go through all the actors and actresses doing this.
No.
But
no. This is the tease for the listeners. Listeners,
right?
Go to the blog post. Because there's a bunch of people who are nominated this year for Oscars, but also, because we've changed the rules, there's some people in there that were not nominated that maybe should have been.
Exactly. You know, and each category is broken out by lead actor, fictional character, lead actor, historical character, lead actress, fictional, boom, 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 boom. And it's an interesting look. I mean, it's thinking about how, what the actors have to do in the historical character category versus what they have to do for making up a character from whole cloth. And as anybody that's tried to cast anything with, let's just say, local regional theater actors, to be charitable, finding good actors is super difficult.
Right.
I've tried it several times, and I think I've only found one or two people ever that I thought, oh, wow, this person could hold their own in a real movie. So, yeah, it's tough. So people creating a character out of thin air with nothing to base it on is an achievement. When they could do it at this level, it's spectacular. So there you go. That's how you fix the Oscars.
We have a lot more details in the blog posts, so go to dorkingoutshow.com.
Yes.
And read all 3 parts. They're not that long. They're not as long as this podcast.
That's true. They are they are much more concise, much tighter, much better argued, much less blathery. But you know what?
A lot less of me being a total scatterbrain.
Maybe.
Maybe.
Sonia. So, actually, you know what? Let's announce a couple things. So, this episode is coming out, I believe it comes out on Monday, tomorrow. Then, towards the end of the week, Sonia and I are going to have our annual Oscar picks.
Woo! I'm excited.
We're not going to wait to the very last minute.
No.
Like the coward that I usually am.
You're gonna change them at the last minute, too.
You know what? It's funny. I am definitely reserving the right to change them at the last minute.
No, I know you will.
We'll see. You know what? I I think you and I are, and a lot of Oscar prognosticators, we are in for a world of hurt. I think we are just going to get decimated this year. Like, all of our vaunted prediction powers are just going to be crushed, because this is the most difficult Oscar race to handicap I've seen in years.
In years past, I've been like, I'm going to kick everyone's ass.
Right.
At Oscar pool. Like, very confident that I'm going to win.
Right.
And this year, I'm like, I don't.
We'll see.
Maybe we give a prize out for the person who misses the most.
I gotta win something. Exactly. So, Sonia Mansfield.
Yes.
Is there anything else that you would like to say?
I'll just say goodbye, and I'm sorry.
Bye. Oh wait! Also, the day after the Oscars, we're gonna have our Oscar wrap-up thing.
That's gonna be fun because I really will be drunk then.
You know what? every once in a while, we have to give something to the listeners that listen to the very last millisecond of the show. So thank you for listening. So. This little announcement is just for you, super loyal listeners. But we already said goodbye, so get out of here.